Hi, Jason. Welcome to Funnel Vision. Really excited to have you on today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about today is sales teams and some of the challenges when there's a lack of strategy or a lack of continuity between the team. So just jumping right in, when you look at sales teams today, what weaknesses show up over and over, especially when there's no strategy or, sales strategy behind the work that's being done?
It's going to vary quite a bit depending on the size of the company. Smaller companies are usually going to be owner founder driven sales. And then as you scale and start to build a sales team, the picture changes. But I think the biggest factor that we see is inconsistency and being able to determine revenue. They're missing that driver that is consistent and predictable. And I think that's the biggest fault. Tied to that is the owner, and this is a frustration I hear a lot from CEOs, owners, sales directors, is being able to hold people accountable to specific behaviors, which then obviously leads to you've got somebody who's ineffective, but you can't quite put a finger on why they're ineffective. And then you feel like you've got to micromanage, and one thing leads to another.
Yeah, that it's especially, it sounds like, we're chatting about that pivotal point where it's an owner founder led company, like small, medium sized company, owner founder led, and switching over to so the founder owner is not leading the sales anymore, or they need to bring in salespeople and then figuring out how to replicate that, because, and kind of leads me into my second question is that so many reps try to mirror the founder, and the founder often they're selling on just instinct. And because they're the founder, they've got credibility, they've just got instinct, they have this passion for their product or service. And new sales reps, when they come in, trying to replicate that may not be the right answer. They need, would create problems if they were to just, try to do what the founder does. So any thoughts on there, on what problems that can create, if the new reps are trying to mirror what the founder does?
Well, I think the biggest thing is founders are not usually, and I'm painting with a big brush here, but founders, particularly visionary minded founders, are not typically good at detailed processes. And so I know in my early days, I would hire someone and basically go, there's your desk, there's your computer. Let me know if you have any questions. Not the best way to train and develop. And so we are founders and visionaries are self-starters. We don't need a lot of information. In the Colby assessment, which is like a profiling tool for how you work, there's a score called a quick start. And most of the time visionaries are pretty high on quick start. Don't give me a lot of information, so let me go. And then we hire somebody and they're desperate for direction and specifics on how they're supposed to sell. And so there's this huge gap between what we do as a founder, as the primary sales leader in the organization, and then what we teach. We just want them to get it. And the reality is they don't always just get it. As a matter of fact, it's extremely rare that you're going to hire somebody that just gets it. So then, like you said, they're just kind of looking at what we did and hoping to mirror it, but without clear direction, or particularly clear metrics that you can scorecard, clear KPIs. Like, what does it look like to sell in this company? What behaviors do you expect from me? And so we're really missing it. And this is why I see repeatedly, I don't know if you've seen this experience, but you see a founder trying to get out of the sales role and they hire and they fail. And then they step back into the sales role, and then they hire and they fail and they step back into the sales role because they didn't define the process. They're not clear on who's going to fit that process. And so it ends up being a very frustrating and very expensive endeavor to try to replace themselves at sales. And I don't have any statistics to back it up, but I swear this is where a lot of companies get stuck. This is where you're going to run into that $2 to $5 million ceiling where the founder just can't get out of sales and focus on scaling the company.
Yeah. Something you said there really caught my attention. It was that the founders trying to, they step out of the sales seat, they try to hire somebody to replace themselves. And then it's a cycle and they keep doing it. And I do see that often with our clients. And I think the biggest challenge there is that they're trying to replace themselves, like in the way that you worded that. It's that the understanding that you are not going to be able to replace yourself. Nobody else is going to come in and be able to be the founder. You have to be able to replace yourself with a sales team and processes and strategy that oftentimes, like as a founder, like you're not working with that. You're just doing it and it's happening. So you're right. People try to replace themselves just by like, hey, I'm going to hire this person because they're great. They're great at talking and they are great at relationships, but really getting into like what you need and having that strategy and metrics and all of that is what they need, not just some person that's going to, replace them and very easily fit into their shoes, because that's not going to happen generally. What happens when you do have a team and everyone's just going through the motions, but they don't have a clear plan? And how does that lack of intention show up in results?
Inconsistency. You've got, I actually have a meeting after this afternoon with a team, and the primary concern of the CEO is the performance of the salespeople. There's no real measurable to why sales happen and why they don't. It's very much arbitrary. And I think what most teams are missing when it comes to sales are those leading indicators of what do you do and what results does it produce? I met with I think it's $1 billion insurance company, director of sales for them. And I said, what do you do to drive sales? And this proves to you that it can be done without these measurables. And they basically just said, we have coffees with people. And I said, well, what's your coffee to close ratio? They have no idea. So there's a strategy. It's just a very ambiguous, light strategy. It doesn't have the specifics because they either have been so successful that they feel like they don't need them, which is the rare story, or they're afraid to hold people accountable. Particularly in sales, you see a lot of these guys and girls that are in sales push back on CRM. They hate the CRM. They don't want to put in their data. They don't want to track anything. And so if somebody's successful, we tend to just let them run. And the problem is we can't measure it for the next guy that comes in that might need some help. And so it ends up being a frustrating process for everybody involved. But it's been shocking to me as I've grown my sales, the sales consulting side that I do. It's been shocking to me to see the level of companies from $1 billion companies down to $1 million companies that do not have that specific strategy. I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of think I went off on a tangent there. But.
No, you're right. You did answer the question, which is, what we find is that inconsistency. And that kind of leads into a next question is like, then when you have that inconsistency between reps, you have one person that's doing something, one person that's super successful at their coffee meetings, another person that's successful at, cold calling. You have another person that's not successful at all and is trying everything. So if you have inconsistency between sales reps from messaging, activity levels, how does that make it like, how can you expect to scale? Which is, kind of a trick question there. Like you can't scale really, without that. So it makes it that challenge. But like, what do you see on that? Like, do you see different reps having different?
Absolutely. That happens all the time. And I think that the statement that you can't scale is a little off. People are accidentally scaling. So they've got an idea. The problem is their efficiency isn't what it ought to be. We ought to be scaling faster, or at least with a higher profit margin. Cause it's great to scale to, from 10 million to 20 million. But if your profit margin goes from 20% down to 5%,
Mm.
then why are we even bothering to scale? We might as well have stayed at a $10 million company at 20% over a $20 million company at 5%. It doesn't make any sense. So we do see them kind of accidentally scaling. Just efficiency is what gets lost. And I think it's really important to remember that the point of running a business is to be profitable. And without those efficiencies, then you can't be. And without accountability, you can't be efficient. And now we're back into the KPIs and the measurables that we hold our sales teams responsible for. And not just letting them run out and do everybody just make it up all over again. Great processes. The whole concept of a great process is that there is a best way to do the right thing every time. You know, there's a best way to weld something. There's a best way to make the widget. There's a most efficient way. But with sales teams, for whatever reason, we lose that truth and we let it go. And I don't know if it's fear of accountability or the lack of a system. It might be a little bit of both. But lack of clarity around what we expect from our sales teams in terms of those leading measurables, I would probably rank as number one. They don't know what the win looks like at the end of the week. Like, what does it look like to win?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so important. And it's all in, you know, with when you have a sales team that is doing the same things and is accountable and everything else, you're able to get that data, you know, to then figure out what actually works. And so what do you see? Like, what are there any specific, like, as far as when you're looking at data, like, what data should the client be collecting? Is there data that is, you know, helps the sales process and would help them scale? Like, what are the things that they should know about their sales reps? And I guess getting at is also getting the buy-in from the sales reps and making sure that they are documenting in order to get that data.
All right. So for your listeners, this is probably the most important thing that I'll say the entire time. Stop focusing on closing and on the end deal and start focusing on the behaviors that lead to the closing. Mm-hmm. That is the biggest shift that I have to make with my clients is stop talking about the close. The close is just the end game. What happens before the close is what's important. And there's a multitude of behaviors that I think have been lost over the years. Probably number one, and one of the biggest things that I teach my clients is proactive calls. Pick up the phone. I mentioned earlier, I'm going to meet with a client or a potential client this afternoon, and I already know they're picking up the phone. Not at all. Everything they're doing is an in-person visit. But if you think about an in-person visit, I know in this particular structure, that in-person visit, anywhere from 45 minutes to 60 minutes is how long that in-person visit takes. I can have somebody make 20 phone calls in the same time that person visits one client. We can touch base with 20 of them. And that's that, like, it feels good to go see a client, but when you can talk to 20, what does that look like at the end of the year? You know, personal touches are still needed. But that proactive call is probably the number one factor that my clients shift and start to see impact. When I say proactive call, I mean calling when nothing's wrong. Then we've got behaviors like a did you know question. Most of us in what we do, we sell multiple products. So do your current clients know all the products that you sell? You know, if you're a plumbing company, did you know we also sell tools? I noticed that you buy all your PVC and your wax rings and your toilets and your fixtures all from us, but I noticed you don't buy any tools from us. Did you know we sell tools? And a lot of people don't know. If you've got thousands of SKUs, same thing with a restaurant. You buy all your seafood from us. Do you know we have chicken and steak as well? And then reverse, did you know? Asking those questions. And we measure all these. So we measure for my clients, we measure how many proactive calls, how many did you know questions, how many reverse did you know? What else are you working on I can help you with? Asking for referrals. Who else do you know I can work with? I love working with you. I'd like to work with more like-minded people. Pivots. A lot of times we'll say, did you know we have chicken? And they'll go, no, I didn't know that. Would you like some chicken? It's really simple, but a lot of times I listen to sales calls and they miss those really critical factors of, Ask for the sale. Do you want me to put some on the truck for you today? We've got a truck going out tomorrow. We can have that to you. You know, we're running a special, whatever that looks like. So I won't go through all of them. There's 8 behaviors that we measure in sales that are all proactive. They're all leading indicators of where sales are going to go. And we measure swings, not hits. So we're measuring the attempts, not the final result.
Yeah. And no, I love that. And it's so simple over like pick up the phone, make a phone call, but it's not easy. It's difficult to get, get the buy-in, but everybody's got a phone. Everybody, like it's simple to pick up the phone and do that, but it's not easy. It's hard to get into the habit of that. But I definitely can see where that makes such a difference is, proactively with, all the relationships and everything. So if you've got a company that is looking to build something scalable, where should they start? And what does a repeatable, realistic sales plan actually look like in practice?
I mean, I'll like shameless self-promotion, pick up the book Outgrow, and I don't get anything out of that. The founder of Outgrow is Alex Goldfein, and he gets the residuals from that, which is probably 10 cents a book. But it's incredibly helpful and it gives you a guide for some of the behaviors that I'm talking about. But if you don't read or you don't want to read the book, very simply set up proactive behaviors, leading indicators that you expect from your team. I'm going to launch a team. If I become their Outgrow advisor, I'm going to launch a team and I'm going to say, I want you to make 5 proactive calls, the entire sales, just 5, 1 a day. Real simple. Ask 1 a day. Ask a did you know question. 1 a day. Ask a reverse did you know question. You can actually knock that out in about 10 minutes because most of the time people don't pick up the phone. And so I'm going to have them pick up the phone and call and say, hey, it's Jason. I was thinking about you today. Wanted to check on you and the family. By the way, did you know, and then fill in the blank. We have a special, we have something going on. It's so simple. Like you said, it does require some discipline. And that's the biggest fall off that I see in clients that failed to execute on this is they are simply undisciplined. And that's sad to me because it's 5 minutes a day. It can change the face of your sales team if every person just takes 5 minutes a day and executes on these. The addition of that, if you look at the behaviors and actions at the end of the week, 5-10 minutes a day is probably 10 actions a day. That's 50 a week. That's 2,600 a year. 2,600 things that they weren't doing that took 10 minutes a day. The ROI on that is insane. And we see on average clients growing by 15 to 30% year over year. Wow. So I've got a company right now. It's a plumbing company. I'm not going to say the name because everybody's going to know it, but we're in talks right now. They're growing by an average of 3.8% a year. Our clients are growing by 15 to 30% a year because they have the proactive behaviors that we've set up for them and it works.
Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible. And I've read Outgrow. I actually have it right over there on my desk. Good. But yeah, no, wonderful. And it is. It's just such a great, system. So Jason, tell us about you. What do you do? Where can people find you?
So, 6stonescoaching.com is my website. That's the number 6stonescoaching.com. I do 2 things and, I had intended for the rest of my life to do 1. But I found such a fit with Outgrow, that I added Outgrow to my consulting and coaching company. So first thing I do is EOS. I'm sure most of your listeners are familiar with Entrepreneurial Operating System. We really just help owners and leadership teams get more of what they want out of their companies, through discipline, accountability, and just a structure to run the business on. What was missing from that is a really reliable sense of how to grow your revenue. And that's where Outgrow came into play. Just as a tiny story, my practice had gone flat and I was banging my head against the wall on how to add people. And I'm embarrassed to say this, but I was going to networking events and meeting people, and I was hoping they would call me, and they did not. And so when I got introduced to Outgrow and the whole concept of pick up the phone, my practice exploded after applying those. And I went, holy smokes, all of my clients need to know about this. So many of them are struggling in the revenue space. And that's when I added Outgrow and became certified Outgrow advisor. And so now I do those two things. I help them scale and provide structure. And then we add a very practical, predictable revenue generation through the behaviors in Outgrow. Like you said, it's easy to understand. It's easy to read the book and go, we could do this. But changing the culture in your company and making it, cementing it, I think is a good term, into what you do on a regular basis. That's where I come into play. And it's incredibly challenging to do that, especially if you're a company with some scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you so much for being on the show, Jason. This was all amazing advice. I think our listeners are going to be able to take away some, practical things to do and a good book to read, and all of that. So I appreciate you being on today, and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.